Hello and welcome. Joining me today to share the 10 books that had a major impact on her life and work is psychic, paramedic, and surgeon SarahK Grace. A paramedic in California's busiest 9/11 systems for 15 years, Sarah Grace has been able to see, hear, and feel energy outside of the normal senses since the age of 7. Now she's a full-time medical intuitive, psychic surgeon, and best-selling author. Sarah K. Grace. And do you like to have the K always in there? You don't mind?
Find me with it. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah Grace, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sandie, and hello to everybody watching.
So tell me what it was like for you to have to distill the list of all the books you've read down to just 10.
It was an interesting homework assignment, if you will, because I was an avid reader growing up. And then just in the last 25 years, I've been very much involved in personal work, the energy healing world. And so it's kind of a compilation. My list is a compilation of a lot of what I've utilized to become empowered in my life now.
So, tell us about, your relationship with books. I mean, were you always, a reader?
As a kid, yes, more as a kid, growing up pre-internet, I think that we kind of had it good in a lot of ways. And I used to just really enjoy devouring the different Nancy Drew series or Anne of Green Gables series. And I remember my mind at the time when I was young and it was forming, I would just really enjoy the grammatical structures of sentences and alliteration. And when people would utilize really great visual description, I just loved it as a kid. And I really think that it helped form me as a writer by reading a whole bunch when I was young. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your list is an interesting list. I don't know if you've given it to me in chronological order of when you read it, but we'll just work our way through it. And we'll start with, one of my favorite books, which is The Road Less Traveled, A New Psychology of Love, Traditional Values and Spiritual Growth by Scott Peck, published in 1978. That was quite an eye-opener for me.
Mm-hmm. That book really changed my life. At the time, I was still young. I was about 20, I think, when I discovered it. And I was still in a victim mindset, not only over what I had been through during my upbringing, but around being so sensitive, not understanding why I am the way that I am. And that book really put it in my face that regardless of all of that, I'm still responsible for really every aspect of my life. And I was able to have a profound light bulb moment of like, wait a second, holy crap, like I can't blame these things. It's how do I want to shift perspective, right? And that book really launched kind of my healing journey and my own, self discovery and self awareness process.
Mm. Yeah. Do you remember how it came into your life?
No, I have no idea. It was one of those, the universe, it was just time. Yeah, it may have come through a friend. I'm not sure how it did, but I still to this day have that very copy on my bookshelf upstairs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just presented us with a whole other perspective. Um, I found it pretty stunning at the time. Pretty stunning. So, book number 2. Now, this is a book that has come up a couple of times, nowhere near as often as it should. It is Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting, The Astonishing Power of Feelings by Lynn Grabhorn, which was published in 1999. So, what was it about this book, that decided you to put it on your list?
Piggybacking off of the self empowerment victim mindset into personal empowerment mindset that the first book did, I really appreciated the author's relatability and kind of lamenting in the way that life was going, but having the realization of, wait a second, I on the inside have a lot of authority to change. And instead of being in my head, thinking about everything, your life is waiting. Go live your life. Like, what do you want to create? So I remember reading that and having it be very relatable and palatable in terms of like, okay, yeah, I get this. And the stories in it were great.
And it really did create quite a stir when it first came out. So I am surprised that it doesn't appear more often on people's lists. Mm. So book number 3, The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You by Elaine Aron, published in 1996.
Another great one. I identify as a highly sensitive person and or empath, very deep feeler, perceiving things very intensely. And my outer world had me believing there was something wrong with me and that it was my job to kind of conform to the way that the world is. This book actually, for the first time, showed me that I'm not alone. I'm not alone as I am as a sensitive. There's actually a whole bunch of us. And then kind of normalizing, which goes a long way. You know, when you feel like there's something wrong with you or you feel like you're isolated or by yourself, it can be really transformative when you have the understanding that you're not alone and that there are other people who can understand. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. This one, you know, as I said, is published in 1996. And yet it was probably a bit ahead of its time. I mean, I know it was perfectly timed as far as people like you are concerned, but suddenly now we have a whole slew of books about being energetically sensitive, and people are paying far more attention to it. Back then, you know, people didn't have much time for it. They didn't have much tolerance for people who were ultra sensitive, and I know from many of my friends that it made life rather difficult and challenging.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
How did you find, I mean, working as you know, in the, we call, you know, as a fire person, how did you find that is such a traumatic, in your face, um, you know, situation to be in, that to be energetically sensitive, I just can't imagine how you navigated that.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Atypical field for an ultra sensitive to go into, for sure. And at the same time, now I'm more aware that there's so many nurses and even doctors. There are some other paramedics and even cops and police officers. My upbringing was very violent and intense. So I was kind of hardwired, if you will, for intensity. So going into the 911 system to me was actually like a duck to water. And I didn't know at the time that my sensitivities were actually going to come into play to the degree that they did. And we can talk more about that later. But it actually paired really well. I just had to do a lot extra to maintain my own health, my own physical health, my mental health, to clear my field and to kind of not take that all home.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, book number 4 is A Guide to Healing Through the Human Energy Field by Barbara Ann Brennan,
Mhm.
published in 1986. I consider this book to be an absolute classic. Anybody who is working in healing or wants to know anything about it should read this book. And sadly, it too doesn't come up as often as I feel it should.
Mhm. You know, she was a pioneer. And what I like about her, because I kind of have that type a little bit alpha like mentality and personality type. And Barbara Brennan had the same in that she was a NASA scientist and then she went in as a therapist and she had a highly analytical mind like I do. And so the relatability to me and the groundedness to me really, really resonated. And I practiced for many years before I actually read that book. And for me, it was very confirming of what I have been doing and experiencing for a long time. I was like, yep, that. And so it was great. I know she's still to this day, she's passed, but her college down in Florida lives on. So
Yeah. Yeah, what a legacy. So many healers owe, you know, so much to her. Book number 5, another one that is, you know, somebody's incredible legacy. Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, published in 1984. And what a considerable impact that book's made on people's lives.
Another pioneer.
Yeah.
Another one ahead of her time, you
Mm.
know, introducing kind of it's common awareness nowadays, but back then it wasn't, that thoughts create reality and you get to choose how you want to view it and how your perception of things impacts your health, and introducing the concept of whatever ailment or challenge being wisdom, right? If we're open to viewing it as such. So
Yeah.
she's great.
Sort of book that, stands alongside people's first aid books on their library shelves. You can look up an ailment and go to the first aid, or you can look it up in her book and do something else and understand what is causing that problem.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to stop for just a second. I'm not going to stop the recording, but I will edit it out because I think that they have changed the layout of Riverside again, and I cannot see the timestamps.
Oh, I don't.
It must be recording
Oh,
because
I see one over here. It's 11:31, 32.
where is it placed?
I see a little column over here. It's black and it says you and one other, and it's just got a little ticker box on it.
Huh. I don't see that. Okay, as long as you can see it. And it's only 10:09. Okay. Does it say how long we've actually been talking? So I can...
12 minutes now.
12 minutes. Okay. Fine. That gives me a guideline. Okay. So, book number 6, Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma by Peter Levine, published in 1997. That seems to be a good decade for all books to emerge.
I like this one a lot just because we are essentially the only mammal that doesn't just shake off and release trauma as it happens. We store it instead. And there's so many people dealing with physiological ailments and or emotional imbalances that can be tied directly to stuff that's energy that's stuck in the body, trauma that's stuck in the body. And again, the way that I'm wired, I really like grounded, analytical, not necessarily scientific, but people that, have gone through schooling and education. And Peter Levine certainly has. He's become an amazing pioneer in somatic therapy. And really, there's an emerging field now in the world of therapy as opposed to just talk therapy, which is fine for what it is. But to really heal, we got to get it out of the body, so that he kind of, I don't know that he pioneered it, but he's definitely got a leading edge message for how to actually heal the trauma from the body.
I'm curious, you said at the beginning that we are the only species that, doesn't shake off trauma. How do we know that other species don't?
That's in his book. I'm quoting from his book. I don't know that we are that exactly, but you see on any of the documentaries in the wild, something is chased or attacked and they get away and they shake, right? Or a dog will shake. And it's just interesting how we don't. And we live in this world of constant stimulus and bombardment. A lot of people have come through a lot of trauma and traumatic events, and they haven't processed it, and it's not quite as simple, I don't think, as like shaking, maybe initially right after it first happens, but as it gets stuck in the body, there's some work to be done to free it and release it.
Actually, I have heard that before, that we should shake ourselves after something. After something, major has happened to us, and that is a way of the body helping to come to terms with it, to integrate the experience. Fascinating thought. I'm going to look that up, learn more about it. So book number 7, The World of Shamanism, New Views of an Ancient Tradition by Roger Walsh, published in 2007.
Mm-hmm. I like this one because it brings in a lot of the different cultures of shamanism. shamanism has become kind of a hot topic in the spiritual world in the last decade or so, and there's a lot of people leaning into plant medicine usage, which can be wonderful tools. And it's good to have a foundational understanding of what shamanism is, kind of the different branches of where, the cultural aspects come from. And it's really dealing with shadow integration, right? Any of the darker, denser, more traumatic things that are in our bodies, in our psyches, in our field. How is it that we can kind of go down into that, find the wisdom, and then come out to heal and to integrate? So I liked that he doesn't just fixate on one particular kind of shamanism, but he's pulling from, this is what this tribe does and this area of the world does and these things. So I think it's a really good, I don't know that it's an introductory book, but it definitely gives people a good understanding of like what shamanism is. And if they're thinking of, doing some deep healing work, it can kind of point them in a direction.
You studied for 5 years shamanism. Did you train with anybody?
Different plant medicine men and women. I did a lot of that type of journey work. I worked with Hank Wesselman, who was great back in the day with him and Jill, and they had the drums and the rattles, which is a beautiful way to essentially get into that hypnagogic state of in between, where you can go into these places to find the blockages or the fears or the traumas. So there was Hank Wesselman and then Roger Walsh's book. Jose Stevens, he's Power Path Seminars. He's huge in the way of shamanism and bringing it into awareness. And then the firsthand experience for 5 years with plant medicines.
I loved Hank Wesselman and his work. I interviewed him many times, and in fact, I believe that I might have been the last person to interview him. He came on this 10 Best show, and a couple of months later, he died. And later on, I spoke to Jill, and I think she came on too. And it's so sad to hear about his passing.
They did a lot of great work, though.
They
It
did.
was
They did.
really impactful for sure.
Yeah. So, book number 8. Now, this is one that consistently appears in people's lists. A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose by Eckhart Tolle, published in 2005.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another staple. Another way of reframing, right? What the goal is and how we get to choose to look at it, the non-reactivity, acceptance of the non-attachment aspect. And yeah, it's a beautifully written book, and obviously, kind of a cornerstone or a foundational one for most people in the spiritual and energetic world for sure.
Book number 9. This is a new one on me. Where the Tree Falls, the Forest Rises, Stories of Death and Renewal by Charlene Elderkin, published in 2013.
This book just recently came into my world because Charlene just came into my world about a year ago. And we have become acquaintances. And she's just got this fascinating story. She plays the harp for people in hospice. And what an amazing offering, I mean, literally, as people are transcending, as people are graduating and passing, to have somebody playing the harp, I mean, it's picturesque almost, right? And so I was fascinated. I was like, girl, how did you, because I've never heard of anybody else playing the harp. I was like, how did you fall into this? And she shared her story. And she was like, yeah, I wrote a book. And so I read the book, and it's really great in the way that the family and the friends of the person who died are telling the story of the person as they remembered them, and then the death process. And it turns it all into a celebration. I think culturally, we're taught to fear death. We kind of hide away from it, shy away from it. And in actuality, it's as natural as birth. And so through her stories, it doesn't diminish the finality of death, but it makes it more inviting and relatable and less scary. So the storytelling in it is phenomenal.
Yes, I heard of a group of people who actually go, cancer patients, people at end of life, and they go and they sing to them.
Mhm.
And I thought that was lovely.
So beautiful.
Mm, yeah. Book number 10, The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, published in 1988. And this also appears very, very frequently.
He's just awesome. He's such a great writer. You can pick pretty much any one of his books, and they're just amazing. But yeah, The Alchemist is another kind of foundational cornerstone for people in our world, the energetic and spiritual communities. I just love his writing style, and I've read, I think, most all of his books, and there's a number that are just phenomenal. So, just really great writer.
Of these 10 books, which one would you say, you know, really kick-started new thinking or shifted your perceptions the most?
Road less traveled,
The
no
road
doubt.
leveled? Yeah.
That changed my life because it totally introduced a new way of thinking to me. And it came at a time that I was ready, right? I didn't want to keep doing the same things and saying the same things, right? I wanted something else. And that pivotal message of, yes, all of this happened to you. And yes, this is what you've been through. What are you going to do about it or with it? I was just like, and ever since then, I've just really advocated self-empowerment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It is a game changer. Well, that's your 10 best list. Let's talk about you. Um, you say that you've been able to see, hear, feel energy. You've known about that since the age of 7. Do you think it came in at the age of 7, or were you actually aware of that a lot younger?
One day I woke up and I could see auras around people, and I was 7 when that happened. I know that a lot of people have like a traumatic brain injury or a car accident or a knock to the head in some way and their gifts come on. But again, I came from such a violent upbringing. It wasn't like a one, I couldn't identify one thing. It was kind of cumulative. But one day for me, and I grew up in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation before the internet. And that's important because it was very linear, very conservative. And so I just wake up and all of a sudden I can see energy, see colors around people. And then over the course of the next few weeks and months, it increased to sensing their thoughts, being able to see disease in their bodies, knowing if they're lying, feeling their feelings. And then I could see spirits of deceased humans and Native Americans on the reservation. And I was like, what is this about? You know, I just was a kid and I just wanted to be normal like anybody. But that really began the odyssey, if you will.
Were you able to talk about this to anyone?
I finally shared with my family, a family member, and unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned. And they said, don't ever talk about this. We will send you away and you'll go to a loony bin. And obviously, that's going to be pretty, leave an impression, right? Like, I was just this little kid. I was already really overwhelmed. I'd disassociate. I'd have headaches. I couldn't like think clearly because there's so much stimulus. And then to confide in someone and be shamed, I really internalized a deep sense of toxic shame, really thinking something was wrong with me. And yeah, that lent itself to many years of healing work to get to where I am now.
Are your family members still alive today?
Mm-mm. Well, they're all passed on.
Did they ever, get to know the work that you're doing now?
My dad, in the later years, by this time I was already out. I'd written a couple of books and I was doing a lot of these shows, and I've had a big practice for a long time. And he was like, well, I don't understand it, but I guess you're good at it. So that's as much as I got.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That must be so hard on a child. It's one thing to have all of these experiences that other people aren't. And it's quite another to know, or to be told that it's something shameful.
Mhm.
Mm.
Fortunately, I think it's shifting quite a bit because there's so many more sensitives that are either waking up to the fact that they are, or we've got all of the spectrum kids coming in, and those guys are holding a super high frequency and sensitivity level. And so it's more commonplace now. It's so funny to me that like now this stuff trends on TikTok, right? Whereas when we were coming up, it was like, oh, don't talk about this. So
Yeah,
it's
now the whole world knows.
it's a different world for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. What made you decide to become a paramedic?
My intuition led me there. I after the upbringing, and it was very unstable, and then when my mom died when I was 17, and that kind of catalyzed my off the rails time. So I was trying to cope through addiction, through alcohol and through drugs, and having some semblance of like control or safety or power in the mess of what my life was at that time. I fumbled all over for a while, but my intuition, every time an ambulance would go by, was like, I was so scared of it though, because I was like, yeah, but I could kill people. Like, you got to know what you're doing. That's a big deal. I didn't realize at the time that there's a million steps, between where you start and where you end up being kind of a senior medic. So my intuition got me there. And yeah, it just was such a beautiful experience.
And you must have had occasions when your intuition was telling you something that others couldn't see. How did you navigate that?
Well, at the time that I started my EMS career, I was in South Central Los Angeles, so in Compton, Inglewood area. So we were very, very busy and there was a lot of death. And I noticed that I became the person, the paramedic who was always responding to the very critical and always around death. And I started to notice on scene, my experience would be very matrix like. Everything would slow down. Anytime death is near, I taste metal still to this day, and I don't know what that's about, but it was a wonderful tell because I would know 2 or 3 steps ahead of what was actually happening. So in the practical reality, I'm already reaching for the medications, the IVs, the intubations, the whatever that I would need to assist. But on the energetic level, I was able to communicate and see the overall all of everything that was happening on scene simultaneously. And one of the it's nothing I was trying to do. I was still very closeted when I first got in. I just still didn't want anything to do with this. I just wanted to be normal and fit in, but I'm the girl who sees dead people, right? And so I'm not going to lead with that when I'm around like SWAT dudes and like firefighters. Like I'm trying to, you got to be proficient at the job. So I got very proficient at the skills of the job. But I started to notice there was almost like a symphony happening in the middle of extreme chaos or trauma. So you're thinking of buildings collapsing or multi-car pileups or whatever's happening here. But the energies, I started to notice kind of some synchronicities and things that would happen in the moments leading up to death and then as the people were dying. And so I became like a midwife, if you will,
Could you see people's spirits leaving their body?
all the time. Yeah, and it was actually really beautiful. I noticed there's a difference between a traumatic death and a medical death. So in a medical death or in like an expected hospice death, end stage disease process, the person will be in their, hospital bed or at home. Their experience, and it's kind of well known now, it's the veil thins. And what that means is the typical senses here that make up the human world. We got gravity, duality, ego, which is actually not a bad thing, and then the senses. And in the moments of death, all of that kind of softens. And so the energy that's available and around all of us all the time become available to people as that veil thins. So we oftentimes hear of people telepathically communicating to dead loved ones as they're gearing up to die. or they may astral travel to different areas to visit family members before they pass. But what I noticed, and this was really actually cool to see, the chakra system would unfurl like a ribbon, and it would start at the root and it would spin in this really beautiful, very organized. So I knew that it was coming from some higher, divine something. But it would go up the chakra system, and then the person would exit through the crown of the head. And the soul coming out the crown of the head just looks like a little puff of smoke or a puff of like vapor. And if the person had a lot of life left, and then it would be more robust and colorful. And if they were just wrapped and over it, it would be like kind of dusky looking. But what would happen is that it'll come out the top, and the person would then be greeted by loved ones or pets or religious archetypes. So countless times I would be going in to, whether we're declaring death or whether we're working on somebody, who didn't have a DNR or whatever, I would be working on the body, but I would be watching this family reunion happening at the ceiling. And it was such an interesting perspective to be able to see all of that. And then in a traumatic death, that's more abrupt, obviously. You didn't know that morning when you had your coffee and got yourself together that you'd be going out and dying that day. And this happens every single day. So my biggest message, biggest takeaway is always, please, you guys, just live your lives now, because none of us know, right? But in the moment of a traumatic death, just think of it like you're in your body and then boom, you're out. You get in a car accident, you get shot, you get whatever, and then you're just not in your body anymore. Well, we would come on scene. I'd see the crumpled vehicle, I'd see the body in the vehicle, but I'd see the person's soul standing next to the car going like, what's going on? What's going on? And so I would start over the course of my 15 years, I developed kind of a protocol, like where I would rapid fire telepathically, you're in a car accident, you're dead, we're going to pull you out of the car, this is what we're going to do. And I'm not talking, right? I'm talking to my crew members to tell them what to get me, but energetically speaking, to the soul. And then 9 times out of 10 on a trauma scene, there would be a celestial, an angel that would come when the person was going to transition. And that was one of the most incredible sensations, because it's consciousness. I didn't see an angel with wings. I would just see a giant light being that emanated this really glorious, gentle, cobalt blue energy, and everything would go just silent on scene. And then the person who's outside of their body would turn and be like, what is this? And they would eventually go into an embrace and disappear. So I saw that countless times, and it was a lot for my little human brain of like, what do I do with all this? Because I couldn't tell my coworkers. I wasn't super out of it. They all know now. Like, I've been so out for so long. And, but absolutely an incredible vantage point to witness humanity.
Did that traumatize you?
Some of them did. Some of them were, I was like, I don't even know. Like, cause then it's like I had young kids at the time, and I'd have to go back and like, try to go to like parent meetings or whatever and make lunch. And I'm just like, wow, what do you do with all of this information? And some of the ones that were more violent, or the person didn't want to die and they were trying to claw their way back into the body, that would be a very traumatic thing for me to see. But ultimately, I just kind of softened into, there's a higher timeline. There's something larger than all of us, right? And yeah, just accepting.
So, what made you give up?
My intuition, after I saw all these years and I finally get to like senior level, top step medic, I'm dialed in, like I just was in the place where it's anything, regardless of what it was. I'm like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We got this. And then my intuition started pushing me to go into doing energy healing. And so being a paramedic in really gnarly 911 systems is like as far away from energy healing as you could get. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks on that though. But what was happening is I just kept having this intuitive knowing and nudge. And what it was I was still scared. I was scared of why I was like this. And I had a lot of shame that I had to deal with, right? But what happened was I started getting gnarlier and gnarlier 911 calls, and I intuitively knew that I was going to get something that would retire me out. It would be so bad. I couldn't come back from it. And I was like, I don't have to do that. So let me open to this world. And I started with basic meditation, yoga, started with Reiki, and then that really opened to a 20 plus year healing odyssey for myself where I got to explore, the shame, the fear, my addictive spirals, everything that I had done as a result, all of those shadow elements that I had been so ashamed of and scared of. I actually began to see like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Like it makes sense that, that all of that happened. And then I learned about each of the sensitivities, being able to see energy is my strength, feeling, knowing, those are right up there, hearing dead people. Like I got all this stuff going on all the time. So I started one at a time to really understand what is this? Why is this? And then how can I make it work for me? Yeah,
And then you wrote your memoir.
I did. And that was an odyssey unto itself, because I still wasn't fully out at the time. And I was like scared of what my coworkers would think or whatever. But when I put it out, I have to tell you, you know, it's just time. There were so many of my coworkers that actually pulled me aside and were like, yeah, me too, like in my own way. But yeah, me too. And it was a really beautiful thing in that I self-published and it just took off, and it never stopped because it's time and because people resonate with like the realness of how life can get lifey. Like we're all doing the best we can, and if we're coping through behaviors or addictions or whatever, we can have an understanding for that as opposed to, judging ourselves. And then we can shift and we can make changes and we can become empowered. And so, yeah, it's time for sensitives for sure.
Well, that book is called Journey into Grace, Real Life Stories of a Psychic Paramedic. But you didn't stop there. You wrote other books. You wrote Holistic PTSD Recovery for First Responders, Military and Their Families.
I did. Yep.
What
And
are you
again,
offering them in that book?
really different types of healing modalities because again, first responders by nature, we're a different breed because we're running towards what everybody else is running away from. And most of us are type A and most of us are very like masculine or kind of alpha, so we have to talk to them in a way that they can hear it, and they really won't listen to you unless you are one of them. And so, because I've been there and because I understand what it's like, I just wrote it from that perspective of like, hey, I get where you've been, what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've smelled, right? And it's not what we see, it's what we smell and like what we hear that really impact us. And then here's some things that you can do, just introducing things like infrared and EMDR and grounding techniques, meditation time. I mean, there's so many tools available that they may not know about. And so just making it really like, here, try this.
Mm. You've also created some meditations
Mhm.
for them, for first responders.
Yep. Meditations for regular people and for first responder. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's been really sweet too.
We don't often stop to think about what it takes to do those jobs, to
Mm,
be those first responders, to go into the carnage, and be supportive and not throw up or, be filled with fear and anxiety and run away. It's such an incredible gift
yeah.
that these people are giving to the rest of us.
I heard a stat recently that the average human may have upwards of 4 major traumas in their life. That may or may not be, give or take, right? The average first responder has over 400.
Wow.
And so again, we're wired like this. There's a calling. Like people are, I don't know how you could do that, but I look at preschool or kindergarten teachers in the same way. I'm like, bless you. There's no way I could do that. So we are wired for it, and we're navigating the darkest crevices of the human psyche and condition day in and day out, and that definitely takes a toll unless we are willing to take care of ourselves. Yeah. And fortunately, we're seeing a lot more of that, people taking care of themselves. And it's so much more out in the open now, PTSD with combat vets, with first responders. And we're still at about 25 to 35 suicides a day, which is high. But there are more integrative trauma retreats and programs available to first responders now more than ever. So it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you consider, as you said, what they see, what they experience, what they smell, what they hear, what they feel, that we never used to support them. We never offered anything that could help them, begin to integrate their experiences and heal from them. Do you find that a lot of former or present first responders come to you for help?
Yeah. Yes, I'm still very much a paramedic, but now it's energetic paramedic. So I get a lot of first responders, but I also get a lot of clinicians from and business, like very established people that are dealing with whatever their intensity is. And so I still tend to attract, the people that have been to every doctor or specialist and they can't get an answer. Or if they're dealing with very extreme circumstance of addiction or trauma integration or whatever. And so it's been beautiful to watch people opening and being willing to, they want to know how to feel better. They don't know what to do. And most people are so overwhelmed right now, so scared and so tired that they just kind of want to be told. They don't have a lot of extra bandwidth to like do this huge. So it's just kind of like my specialty is just making it make sense, right? Because to me, all the spiritual stuff is great. But like, how's it? What if we can't land it in the practical world? Then what are we doing, right? That's me, right? And
Exactly.
that's the paramedic in me. And so I like just making things. We can take these meta level concepts, but just delineate or break it down into these things where people in their everyday can be like, oh, okay, I can take long, slow, steady exhalations if I need to calm down. I can go out and sit in the sun for 10 minutes and that can help me reset. I can drink more, just very basic things where people can start to shift their personal experience. Yeah, that's what I'm all about now.
And it's wonderful to see that there are so many modalities that are being recommended now.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite one?
Well, my practice is medical intuition and psychic surgery. I don't know that that's necessarily, I think that my healing was largely from shamanism and really going into the darkness to integrate and heal that within myself. So, my personal kind of leaning into fave would be the shamanic techniques and integrations that way. But medical intuition and psychic surgery are so potent because, again, we all know topical and Western is great for what it is. Like, lavender oil is not going to do anything for you if you have an arterial bleed. Like, you need a medic. And there are times where you need a surgeon, or, if you have AFib, you do need a blood thinner. Like, there are things where Western can come in. But when it comes to chronic care, like health, right? That I look at that as more holistic. And so being able to go cut through all of the thises and that's and getting to the root origin of what the disease process is in the person, how it's manifesting, and then what to do holistically, it can be absolutely revolutionary for people.
What is it like to be a medical intuitive and to see things in people's bodies? I mean, you know, do you have an off switch? Can you shut it down? Is everybody walking around open to you to be able
Yeah,
to see?
yes. And the way that I have come to understand that, my experience is that it's just 24/7. And I understand there are some people that have learned to dial it down or turn it off, and that's cool for them. My experience is just so full throttle that it is what it is. And so it's about attention and discernment. So just because I can see it doesn't mean I have to pay attention or do anything with it. And now in session, yeah, we'll go all the way there, right? Like, because that person is open. But when I'm in the grocery store and I can see if it's an entity on somebody, or I can see that they're on meth, or I can see that they're whatever, is going on in their field, I'll just look at it, notice it, and be like, okay. Yeah.
Is it not tempting? That's probably the wrong word. If you saw somebody who had, let's say, a tumor, and maybe they don't know, I don't know how you would know whether they know or not, but to not, it must be hard because the instinct must be there to warn them, but you don't want to traumatize them.
Right. And I experienced very early on when I first started accepting and opening to my gifts, then I got really excited. And I was at the very early stages, and I went to Target, and I was in the bread aisle or cereal aisle or whatever. And there was some girl there, and I could see her dead grandma behind her. And so I took it upon myself to go up and initiate this conversation. Well, this girl did not have a good relationship with that grandma, and it opened a can of worms right there in the Target bread aisle. And I learned such a lesson that day. And my intuition and my guidance, they were just like, no, you have to have expressed consent. Just like being a paramedic, I can be held criminally liable if I don't have expressed consent and we do something as a paramedic and it goes awry. And so I've just brought that exact same mindset from being a paramedic into my practice now. And yeah, if the person is open and if they're asking, that's a totally different. We'll go all the way there for sure.
Do you train people who have your skills but haven't yet learned to master them or direct them?
Yes. And I'm in the process of building Empath X, which is sensitive as superpower. So there's more sensitives coming online, and there's a lot of stuff, books and knowledge out there. What I'm still seeing though is kind of a fragility, right? Oh, I'm so overwhelmed, and oh, it's so hard to be like this, both of which can be true. I mean, holy, I've definitely lived it. It is not an easy life experience to be like this. What I've learned, and it goes back to the start of our conversation with the road less traveled, if you're willing to take 100% accountability for every aspect and be like, yeah, all of that happened. How do I want to be with it? What do I want to do? We can shift the energy to that of empowerment, and we can actually understand that these can be like superpowers, because I do have access to energy ahead of what's happening here, right? So sometimes I kind of have this advantage, not sometimes, pretty much all the time. I have kind of this leg up or advantage, and I can utilize that in the real world to not only help a lot of people, but thrive in my life too. And so that's what I'm up to now, is living the example that just because you're sensitive, you can actually be incredibly powerful. You can shift it from being hard and overwhelming to, no, this is why I'm here. How can I lean into this, and how can I become badass with it?
You have a community program called The Grace Place.
I do.
Tell me about that.
Well, speaking of this, it's, a community of sensitives from all over the world. Everybody's real. They have lives. They're functioning, and they're trying to overcome their trauma, and they're trying to overcome or understand their sensitivities, and being able to have community with people so you don't feel so isolated, so you don't feel like there's something wrong with you, right? It's just such an incredible hub. And I love it so much because it's so real. Like, people are in there, like, being real and genuinely sharing their ups and their downs and their highs and their lows. And so it's not kind of another spiritual dogmatic whatever program. It's like, no, if you really feel like you need some help for who and how you are, and you just want to be real with it and get practical tools, like things that you can implement in the daily, That's it.
So it's like a sanctuary for
Yeah.
empaths. Yeah.
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 And that's the very first aspect. And now we're going to be building empathics. And my whole thing is just, again, practical tools. Like in the moment, what do you do? That's what it'll be.
Yeah. What advice would you give somebody? What's being a first responder, I've read many books talking about how what you say at that very moment of interaction with someone who's experienced a trauma is critical to their survival and their recovery. I mean, is that something that you would say, the first thing we, the public, the non-trained need to know is be careful about what we say to the person? What advice do you give?
Well, there's that element, but it's really just about humanity. Going back to everyone just wants to be seen and valid. They want to be witnessed, right? People want to matter. They want to know that, they're loved, they matter, they're supported. And so there isn't any one eloquent way. I've found that by just being real and just being authentic and showing up in the way that if something like that comes in to your life experience and you're put in a situation where someone is dealing with an illness and about to die or overcoming some severe trauma, even not saying anything, but just listening, not judging, not trying to fix can be pivotal. Because of all the people I work with, a lot of suicidal like people and people that are right on the edge of whatever, most people don't actually want to die. They just want to be heard. They just want to be seen for where they are. And that can be highly impactful. Out of all of my personal healing that I've done and working with all of these other people over the years, the single most healing thing is, to me, validation.
Being present.
Mhm.
Just being present with someone when they're going through such an experience, I would imagine is, you know
Yeah, because I think we've all encountered those people that maybe want to spiritualize it. Oh, well, silver lining, or try to shift your focus. Like, no, 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 none of that right now. We just got to be here. We just got to be here. That stuff can come in later, maybe, but let's just be real with what's happening now.
yeah. Are you planning any more books?
Actually, yeah, I'm going to write a book that joins in with empathics. And so, again, just leaning into sensitivity as superpower. And, I really would love to remember how X Games came into sports? And we can do that with being sensitive to the spiritual world, because I really believe it is our time. There's more and more of us. There's over 1.6 billion of us, like 15 to 20% of the world's population. And that's probably those who know, right? So we could double it with people who are closeted or don't know. So there's so many of us. So let's just make it practical and kind of cool to be like this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, one last question. Steve Jobs famously gave all of the guests, all of the people who attended his memorial service, a copy of Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi. What book would you like to give to the people who attend your memorial service?
Oh, wow. There's so many good ones.
Hard one.
I think I would just circle back. I keep going back to The Road Less Traveled because it was so impactful to me. So we'll say that one. And Steve Jobs, I love the fact that, do you know that he went and tried to join an ashram and then he told the guru about the iPhone device, and the guru said, no, that's your gift to the world. You have to get, and they forced him out. They put him back into the world to create what he did, and he changed the world. I love that he was
It did change the world, and some of us think, was that for the better or not?
right. I'm glad that I had and my children had some life, but before all of the technology came, but this is where we are now.
It would be
So
so interesting if Steve Jobs were alive today to ask him that question, Now, do you think that you did a favor for humanity or not? Yeah.
For sure.
Mm. And we never know, do we? I mean, these wonderful discoveries that we make, and we think, wouldn't it be great? People have all the best intentions, how it can make life easier. And then later on, we look back and we say, if only some people hadn't come along, and used that for other purposes.
Yep, totally.
Mm.
Totally.
Yeah,
There's so much at play, so much energy, so much consciousness. And then we can circle it back to, what am I going to do today?
exactly. Yeah.
Right?
How am I going to move through this? Which
Mhm.
is all we can do.
Exactly.
That's it. That's what's in our power to do. Mm. SarahK, Grace, thank you so much for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books, the ones that guided you the most on your life journey, to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Thank you for having me, Sandie.
Oh,
Thanks
you're
for
so
everything.
welcome. For more information about Sarah Grace's courses, books, meditations, and healing sessions, visit sarahkgrace.com. This show is also available as a free downloadable podcast on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and all of the major podcast platforms. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Sarah Grace.
Thank you. Bye.